Carla Jan Walker was 17 years old when she disappeared. On the surface, her life looked ordinary, the kind of ordinariness that defined suburban America in the early 1970s. But beneath that simplicity was a young woman standing on the edge of adulthood, caught in the fragile space between childhood and independence. She had plans, she had routines, she had a future that extended well beyond the cold night she was taken. Carla was born in 1957 and raised in Fort Worth, Texas, a city that was growing rapidly during her childhood years. Her family lived a structured, middle-class life. Home was stable, predictable, safe. Carla was known as responsible and thoughtful, not reckless or rebellious. She followed rules, respected boundaries, and valued the trust her parents placed in her. At Western Hills High School, Carla was well-liked. She wasn't a troublemaker or a risk-taker. Friends described her as warm, polite, and dependable, the kind of person parents approved of instantly. She did well academically and maintained a steady social circle, balancing school responsibilities with the excitement of teenage life in the early 1970s. Dating, for Carla, came with rules. Her parents were protective, but not unreasonable. They allowed her to go out with friends and attend school events, provided she followed curfews and stayed within known spaces. Carla understood those expectations and rarely pushed against them. Trust had been built slowly, and she guarded it carefully. That trust would play a quiet role in what happened next. On the evening of February 16, 1974, Carla went out on a date with her boyfriend. The plan was simple and familiar: an evening together, nothing extravagant, nothing risky. Like many young couples at the time, they parked in a quiet area, a common teenage ritual that felt private without being dangerous. The parking spot was near a bowling alley on Fort Worth's west side, a place with light, activity, and the illusion of safety. Other people were nearby, cars passed, music drifted faintly through the night air. There was no reason to believe anything was wrong. Sometime after 9 p.m., that sense of normalcy shattered. An unknown man approached the vehicle. What followed was sudden, violent, and chaotic. Carla's boyfriend was forced into the trunk of the car at gunpoint. The attacker acted with speed and confidence, suggesting premeditation rather than impulse. Carla was taken from the passenger seat and forced into another vehicle, disappearing into the darkness within minutes. The entire abduction happened quickly, too quickly for bystanders to understand what they were witnessing, too quickly for intervention. By the time Carla's boyfriend managed to escape the trunk and summon help, Carla Walker was gone. Police responded immediately. Roadblocks were discussed, searches began, but the clock was already working against them. In 1974, investigative tools were limited. Surveillance cameras were rare. DNA analysis was non-existent. The case would depend on witness accounts, physical evidence, and luck. For Carla's family, the night stretched endlessly. As hours passed with no sign of her, fear hardened into dread. The knowledge that she had been taken by force, not wandered off, not run away, meant every moment mattered. And yet with each passing hour, the distance between Carla and safety grew wider. 3 days later, that distance became permanent. Carla Walker's body was discovered in a culvert near Benbrook Lake, just outside Fort Worth. The location was remote, concealed, chosen deliberately. The teenager who had gone out on a date never returned home. The crime scene told investigators one thing immediately: Carla had not been taken randomly and released. She had been assaulted, she had been murdered, and whoever did this had taken steps to separate her from witnesses, from help, from time itself. What they could not know then was that the man responsible would remain free for nearly half a century, hidden not by brilliance, but by the limitations of the era. Carla Walker's case would become one of Texas's longest-running unsolved murders, a story frozen in the 1970s until science finally caught up with the truth. The first hours after Carla Walker was taken were marked by urgency, but also confusion. When Carla's boyfriend escaped from the trunk of his car, he was shaken, disoriented, and frantic. He had been trapped in darkness, listening helplessly as the vehicle moved, then stopped, then moved again. He couldn't say how long he'd been inside. He couldn't tell which direction they had gone. All he knew was that Carla had been ripped away from him by a man with a gun, and that whatever was happening to her was unfolding far beyond his reach. Police arrived quickly, but by the time officers began canvassing the area around the bowling alley, the trail was already cold. Investigators treated the scene as both an abduction and a potential homicide from the outset. The violence of the encounter, the weapon, and the calculated nature of forcing one victim into a trunk while abducting the other suggested a predator who knew exactly what he was doing. This was not a panicked crime. It was controlled. The boyfriend's vehicle became the first critical piece of physical evidence. Officers documented the interior, paying particular attention to the trunk where he had been confined. Fibers were collected, surfaces were dusted for fingerprints. Any sign of transfer, hair, fabric, dirt, was carefully preserved. At the time, these materials could only be cataloged and stored. Their true value would not be realized for decades. The description of the attacker was limited. He had been close enough to threaten, close enough to control the situation, but not long enough to leave a clear visual memory. He was armed, he was decisive, he spoke little. That lack of detail haunted investigators almost immediately. Without a face, the suspect became an outline rather than a person. Search efforts intensified overnight. Patrol units scanned roads leading away from the abduction site. Officers checked wooded areas, construction zones, and secluded pull-offs, places where a vehicle could stop unnoticed. Helicopters were discussed, but provided little advantage in the darkness. Every minute that passed without contact made the likelihood of rescue slimmer. Carla's parents waited at home, surrounded by officers, clinging to hope while bracing for the worst. When Carla's body was found 3 days later, hope gave way to devastation. She had been placed inside a culvert near Benbrook Lake, a location chosen for concealment rather than convenience. The area was isolated, away from traffic and casual passers-by. Investigators immediately noted that the killer appeared familiar with the landscape, someone who knew where to go to avoid detection. The autopsy revealed that Carla had been sexually assaulted and strangled. Her injuries indicated she had fought. There were signs of restraint and trauma consistent with a prolonged ordeal rather than a single act of violence. This was not a crime of sudden rage. It was sustained, deliberate, and personal in the most horrifying sense. Forensic evidence was collected meticulously. Biological material was recovered and preserved. Clothing was examined for fibers not belonging to Carla. Any trace that might link the killer to the victim was documented, sealed, and logged. At the time, investigators could not extract a genetic profile, but they knew enough to preserve the evidence. Even then, there was an understanding that science might one day catch up. The early investigation focused heavily on known sex offenders in the Fort Worth area. Detectives pulled records, conducted interviews, and compared alibis. Men with prior offenses were questioned repeatedly. Some cooperated, others resisted. None could be conclusively tied to Carla's murder. Each elimination narrowed the field, but also deepened the frustration. Attention also turned to the possibility that the killer had attended the bowling alley or lingered nearby, watching couples. Witnesses were interviewed, employees, patrons, nearby residents. A few recalled seeing unfamiliar vehicles, but descriptions were inconsistent and incomplete. Without surveillance footage, investigators were left piecing together fragments of memory that shifted with time. As weeks turned into months, the case grew colder. Leads dried up, public tips slowed. The killer did not strike again in a way that clearly connected to Carla's murder. He disappeared back into the fabric of everyday life, unremarkable and untraceable. For Carla's family, the passage of time was brutal. Her bedroom remained untouched. Her belongings became relics. Every anniversary of her disappearance reopened the wound. They spoke with investigators repeatedly, answering the same questions, hoping each time that something new had emerged. Decades passed. The case file thickened but did not move forward. Advances in forensic science came and went, but without a usable genetic profile, there was no way to test suspects conclusively. Carla Walker's murder became one of many unresolved cases, not forgotten, but suspended. Until, nearly 50 years later, the evidence collected in 1974 was revisited with new eyes. By the late 2010s, Carla Walker's case had reached a point few investigators in 1974 could have imagined. The evidence was still there. For nearly half a century, the biological material recovered from Carla's body had remained preserved in evidence storage, untouched by time, safeguarded through departmental transitions, relocations, and evolving protocols. What once felt like a dead end had quietly become the case's most powerful asset. Advances in forensic science had changed everything. Investigators reopened Carla's file with a specific purpose: to extract a full DNA profile using modern techniques and apply forensic genetic genealogy. Unlike traditional DNA comparisons, which relied on known offenders and criminal databases, this approach looked outward, toward distant relatives who had voluntarily submitted DNA to public genealogy services. The process began cautiously. Analysts retested the biological evidence, confirming it was viable and uncontaminated. Once a usable genetic profile was generated, it was uploaded to a genealogy database approved for law enforcement use. What came back was not a suspect. It was a constellation of partial matches, people scattered across family trees with no idea they were connected to a murder investigation. From there, the real work began. Genealogists built extensive family maps, tracing lineages backward through generations. Each branch was evaluated against known facts from the case: age, sex, geographic proximity, and opportunity. Entire family lines were eliminated. Others narrowed slowly, painstakingly, until the pool of potential suspects shrank from hundreds to dozens, then from dozens to a handful. One name kept resurfacing: David Lee Leonard. Leonard had lived in Fort Worth in 1974. He was the right age. He had no known connection to Carla Walker, which aligned with investigators' long-standing belief that she had been targeted opportunistically rather than personally. He had lived a largely ordinary life in the decades following the murder. No high-profile crimes, no obvious red flags that would have drawn law enforcement's attention earlier. But genetics placed him squarely within the narrowed family tree. Before confronting Leonard, investigators did what they had learned to do over decades of cold case work. They verified everything. They reconstructed Leonard's movements in the mid-1970s. They examined employment records, addresses, and known associates. They confirmed that he had access to a vehicle and familiarity with the areas involved in Carla's abduction and disposal. Everything aligned. To be certain, detectives needed Leonard's DNA. Rather than approach him directly, investigators conducted discreet surveillance. Items Leonard discarded in public were collected and sent to analysis. When the results returned, there was no ambiguity. The DNA profile matched the evidence recovered from Carla's body. After nearly 50 years, the man responsible for her abduction, assault, and murder was finally identified. In 2020, David Lee Leonard was arrested. The arrest sent shockwaves through Fort Worth and beyond. A case that had existed as an unresolved nightmare since the 1970s was suddenly real again. For Carla's family, the moment was overwhelming, a collision of grief, relief, and disbelief that the truth had been waiting silently for decades.
During questioning, investigators laid out the evidence methodically. They did not rely on emotional appeals. They did not raise their voices. They let the science speak. Timelines were presented, locations were discussed. The genetic evidence, precise, irrefutable, left no room for denial. Leonard eventually admitted his involvement, acknowledging that he had abducted Carla from the parking lot and killed her days later. There was no elaborate motive, no justification, just violence, opportunity, and a belief that time would erase accountability. It didn't. Leonard was charged with capital murder. Given the strength of the evidence and his confession, the case moved swiftly through the legal system compared to the decades it had spent dormant. In 2021, David Lee Leonard was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He remains incarcerated. For Carla Walker's family, justice arrived late, but it arrived intact. The truth was no longer speculative. The man who took her life could no longer hide behind time, anonymity, or outdated science. Carla Walker was 17 years old when she was taken from a parked car, a moment of teenage normalcy transformed into lifelong tragedy. Her case stands as a stark reminder that even when decades pass, evidence remembers what killers hope the world will forget. And sometimes, patience is enough to let the truth catch up.